All right, so this will be the last video for this evening, but I did want to take you all the way through the brainstorming that I was able to do today so that you can follow along and do something similar in developing your own topic. So if you remember from my first video, one of my secondary questions, besides what causes the freshman 15, is the freshman 15 fact or fiction? And one of the reasons I wanted to know is because I thought about my own college experience as a freshman, and I actually didn't gain 15 pounds my freshman year. So I started just thinking through what my experience was like, and I started writing about that. So here are the things that I wrote down about my experience that would help me answer that question, at least from one perspective. But keep in mind, my perspective may not be representative of everybody. So I don't know yet if it's fact or fiction, but I am starting with reflecting on my own experience. So when I started college, I didn't even weigh enough to donate blood. There's apparently a weight minimum you have to meet to donate blood. So it started out college fairly thin. And it was the first time I tried grits and had whole milk. I was raised in a house on skim milk. So I was being exposed to some new, rich, really yummy foods that I actually liked a whole lot. And actually to this day, I still drink whole milk. I never could go back to skim. I did not gain significant weight that first or really any year of college, though I did, progressively add on a little bit as I went along, but nothing crazy. I don't even think I gained 15 pounds the 4 years I was in undergraduate total. But nonetheless, body weight and appearance were still a big part of the conversations that I had with all of my female friends, and sometimes even my guy friends at college. So I think, one possible connection is that those conversations started to plant seeds that would grow into, that could grow into a perhaps unhealthy focus or a misunderstanding of body image and weight and its importance and its value, or its overemphasis that our society and our culture tends to put on it. A lot of people tend to place a lot of self-worth in being a certain weight or having their body look a certain way. And even though I didn't personally experience the freshman 15, I was still part of conversations that were very much focused on the fear of gaining weight and what that might do. So I said, okay, great. That's my personal experience. I don't know how much of that I'll use, but I at least wanted to get it down in the brainstorming part. Now, the next thing I did was just a quick research, Google search to see what's out there. And I literally Googled freshman 15 fact or fiction. And one of the first sites that came up is actually the National Institute of Health, which is a government organization that would be considered a credible source, especially in academic writing. And so based on some of the information I saw there, plus a couple of other websites, and again, I'm just skimming. I'm not really going into a lot of detail here. I'm just trying to get an idea of what's out there. And I only looked at the first page because at this point, again, I'm just trying to get a feel before I dive really deeply into this. And what my quick search revealed is that while some modest weight gain is normal in the first year of college, 15 pounds is not the standard. That's way more than most people gain when they come to college. So there were several sites that were saying that freshman 15, that's a myth. That's not necessarily true. What would be more reasonable is somebody gaining, or what would be more precise, would probably be somebody gaining like 2 to 5 pounds that first year. And that's not unusual. But the idea of the freshman 15, that seems to be, from an initial look, a little bit more out of the ballpark. So then I was led to another question. And y'all, this is the nature of brainstorming, right? Like I started out my brainstorming with the assumption that freshman 15 is true and brainstorming all the reasons it might be true. And now I'm actually coming down to this point of brainstorming where my whole perspective might be shifting. My whole focus that I may write this paper on may be shifting entirely. And that's okay. That's the value of brainstorming. So I started entertaining the idea, what if the freshman 15 isn't true? Then how could I still use this topic as a cause and effect topic and write a good essay on it? And so the question I came up with is, how, if this is a cultural myth, if it's not true, how does that myth, how does that, the pervasiveness, the how much people, I mean, when I mentioned this in class, almost everybody chuckled and laughed. You've heard of it because people talk about it, people write about it, and a lot of us accept it for fact. How does that affect us? How does believing in, or at least hearing and being exposed to this idea, how does this affect us as people? And so I actually came up with 2 categories in this brainstorming: the negative ways believing this or being exposed to this affects us, and some of the positive ways it could affect us. So the negative ones were this, this fiction, this fact, this myth of gaining 15 pounds can cause an unhealthy focus on image and weight. If you're terrified that you're going to gain that kind of weight going to college, you may become preoccupied with it, and that's not a good thing. It might give you a misunderstanding of true health. When we talk about health, there's a lot of conversations about how much you weigh. And while that may be one small piece of the puzzle, it's not the complete picture. This myth may also increase our stress and anxiety if we're kind of, like, oh gosh, I don't want to gain 15 pounds. I need to do everything I can. It can be a distraction. It can be a cause of stress. And college is stressful enough. We don't need another one. It could also, believing this myth, being too overly concerned about it, could set patterns for adulthood, on into adulthood, of how we think about our weight and how we engage in that conversation. Now, some of the positive effects believing this myth could have is that it might push us to play intramural sports, to be more active in some way, to join a gym or get out and take hikes or whatever. And that's a healthy thing. That's a good thing. To move your body, that's definitely a positive. It could also force us to consider the fact or fiction nature of a lot of cultural myths or ideas that we hear, and help us start to question, I've heard this all the time, but is it actually true? Another positive is that it could help us dismantle cultural stereotypes around bodies, right? So we believe this thing is true, but it's a stereotype. But in actuality, if it's not true, then we can start to kind of break that down so that it's not having the negative impact on people that it might have been. And one final positive effect is that it might push us to be mindful of our eating and movement patterns. That's kind of tied to the first one about being active. But it might force us, if we are thinking about it, maybe we're a little concerned about it, we might decide to investigate it and make some changes, or put some intention behind making some healthy, mindful choices. So that's where my brainstorming took me. Now, I haven't done, this is again just brainstorming, so every idea is valid. And now what my job is going to be is to kind of parse out all this brainstorming and see where it's going to take me, and see, once I actually do some more in-depth research and find the most credible sources, do they agree with what the National Institute of Health said, that this is actually probably not true? And maybe I'm going to go that route. So what I encourage you to do at this point in your brainstorming is to maybe flip your idea on its head, and think about the opposite. So whatever assumption you made at the beginning, what's the opposite of that? Is there any way that it's true? Is there, are you making an assumption that something's true that maybe potentially isn't true? And if that's the case, then what's the effect of that? If it's not true, then what might be, what might we be thinking, or what changes might we need to make? So I hope this video series has been helpful to you. I'm just illustrating for you my brainstorming process to encourage you along in your own. And as always, if you have questions, send me an email, allison.bixby@ciu.edu, and send one through Canvas. And I look forward to seeing you guys next Tuesday.